Let my people go!
The slaves are mine. Their lives are mine. All that they own is mine.
What if the biggest secrets in the Ten Commandments were hiding behind the scenes, not on the screen? This 1956 epic was built on massive sets, bold choices, strange accidents, and moments so unreal they sound made up. From an almost cast queen to a baby hired before birth, this film had drama before the cameras even rolled. In this video, we'll count down 15 insane details you probably missed, using production stories, cast memories, and behind-the-scenes facts that make this classic feel even bigger. Number 15. The actress who almost became a queen. Long before cameras rolled on the Ten Commandments, one of Hollywood's most admired actresses nearly stepped into the role of Queen Nefertiti. Cecil B. DeMille reportedly became fascinated with the idea of casting Audrey Hepburn, whose elegance and worldwide popularity had already made her one of the biggest stars of the decade. He believed her graceful appearance could bring something unique to the powerful Egyptian queen. During the planning stages, DeMille even kept photographs of Hepburn around his office, studying how she might look beneath elaborate wigs, jewelry, and royal costumes. For a time, she appeared to be one of the strongest possibilities for the part. Despite DeMille's enthusiasm, circumstances slowly pushed the dream casting out of reach. Hepburn had recently married and was living in Europe, where other film commitments demanded her full attention. Spending months in Hollywood for such a demanding production became increasingly unrealistic. There were also concerns about whether her delicate image matched the bold, commanding presence DeMille envisioned for Nefertiti. As production deadlines approached, the legendary director realized he needed someone who could fully commit to the enormous project without delay. That decision opened the door for Anne Baxter, who embraced the opportunity with remarkable dedication. Rather than simply learning her lines, Baxter spent months working closely with legendary costume designer Edith Head to perfect every royal gown she would wear on screen. She carefully studied the character, searching for ways to make Nefertiti feel believable instead of simply glamorous. Baxter even suggested altering her own appearance to resemble ancient Egyptian features more closely, although DeMille ultimately rejected the idea. And while one queen was almost played by a different star, the film's greatest miracle was being built in a way no one expected. Number 14. The most famous special effect in film history. Few moments in movie history are as unforgettable as the parting of the Red Sea in the Ten Commandments. Audiences in 1956 watched towering walls of water open before Moses, creating an image so convincing that many believed they were witnessing something impossible. Decades later, the sequence still holds up as one of the greatest practical effects ever filmed. What makes it even more remarkable is that the entire miracle was created without computers, digital animation, or modern visual technology. Everything depended on creativity, patience, and months of careful experimentation by the film's talented effects team. The famous sequence demanded an extraordinary amount of planning. Under special effects supervisor John P. Fulton, the crew spent roughly 6 months building and combining nearly 30 separate visual elements into a single seamless scene. Miniature models, matte paintings, location footage, controlled water tanks, and optical photography all worked together to create the illusion. One of the cleverest tricks involved filming thousands of gallons of water crashing downward before reversing the footage. When played backward, the water appeared to rise naturally into towering walls. Another section was filmed pouring down a massive ramp, then flipped upside down, making gravity itself seem to work in reverse. These simple but brilliant techniques fooled audiences into believing nature was obeying divine command. The completed sequence cost approximately $1 million, an enormous investment for a single scene during the 50s. Yet every dollar proved worthwhile. The finished effect became the visual centerpiece of the film and helped earn the production an Academy Award for Best Special Effects. Even generations raised on computer-generated imagery continue to admire the craftsmanship behind this unforgettable moment. Instead of relying on technology that would eventually become outdated, the filmmakers relied on imagination and practical ingenuity. Number 13. The Nose That Chose Moses. When Cecil B. DeMille began searching for the perfect actor to portray Moses, he wanted someone whose presence alone could convince audiences they were looking at a legendary prophet. Screen tests and acting ability mattered, but another detail caught the director's attention. Charlton Heston possessed facial features that reminded DeMille of Michelangelo's famous marble sculpture of Moses. The resemblance was striking enough to spark the director's imagination. Rather than dismissing the thought as coincidence, he decided to explore whether Heston could resemble the figure who had inspired generations through one of history's works of art. According to the stories that came out during production, DeMille apparently took this publicity photo of Heston, and then he did what sounds almost like a little dare, a simple experiment kind of thing. Supposedly, he drew a beard on the picture using a pencil, and in the process let himself picture how the actor would look once everything was dressed up, full costume and all that. When the beard was finally there, the resemblance, clicked into place even more, and it started to feel a lot more convincing. Heston's strong jawline, his steady, commanding look, and that distinctive nose seemed to match up well with Michelangelo's idea of Moses. For DeMille, that rough sketch sort of confirmed what he already thought was true. The actor had the physical authority required to lead one of Hollywood's biggest productions, and to carry the whole thing from first day to the end without it feeling like it was slipping. And the outcome stayed with people. Charlton Heston turned in a performance that essentially defined Moses for generations, so much so that most audiences couldn't easily imagine anyone else taking the part. Later, there was this unexpected turn, and somehow the story got even more interesting. Heston ended up cast as Michelangelo himself in The Agony and the Ecstasy, playing the same artist whose sculpture, decades before, had nudged his casting. Whether you want to call it fate or just lucky coincidence, that link still counts as one of those memorable casting stories people keep talking about in Hollywood. Number 12. The Baby Who Was Cast Before He Was Born. Long before filming one of the iconic Nile sequence, Cecil B. DeMille learned that Charlton Heston's wife, Lydia, was expecting a child. Instead of simply offering congratulations, the director made an unforgettable promise. If the baby turned out to be a boy, he would play the infant Moses in the film. It sounded almost unbelievable, but DeMille treated the idea with complete confidence. Before the child had even entered the world, one of Hollywood's biggest productions had already reserved his first acting role. When Fraser Clark Heston was born in February 1955, the very first remarkable note the family got came straight from DeMille. A telegram arrived with a short but unforgettable line, "Congratulations, he's got the part." In just those few words, the newborn was basically introduced as Baby Moses, officially. It still counts as one of the strangest casting tales ever shared, mainly because the contract was sort of offered before the actor even took his first breath. Not many performers can honestly say their career started before they were born. Filming the well-known basket sequence brought an unexpected scare. As the small reed basket drifted across the shallow water, It slowly began taking in water and started to sink, kind of quietly at first. Crew members quickly sensed the trouble. The child welfare officer moved fast, insisting she was the only one legally allowed to lift the infant. Charlton Heston, completely locked into his role, just said, "Give me that child." She passed the baby over right away. The scene was corrected and safely restarted, and the production kept moving. That frightening mishap later turned into another unforgettable legend tied to one of Hollywood's biggest epics, suggesting that even carefully planned moments can wander toward disaster first, then end safely. Number 11. The Pharaoh recruited at Broadway intermission. When Cecil B. DeMille needed someone capable of standing toe-to-toe with Charlton Heston as Pharaoh Ramesses, he did not rely on lengthy negotiations or traditional casting meetings. His attention focused on Yul Brynner, whose commanding performance in The King and I had made him one of Broadway's biggest attractions. Brynner maintained a strict backstage policy, rarely allowing visitors during performances. One evening, though, a stagehand interrupted with an odd kind of message. A man saying he was Cecil B. DeMille insisted the talk could not wait. Brynner was curious, so he agreed to meet during intermission. DeMille, not really the sort to waste a second, walked in, shook Brynner's hand, and then laid out his proposal. Would he play Ramesses in the Ten Commandments? A picture DeMille felt future generations would still appreciate and keep? Brynner only needed one answer, really. He just said, "Certainly." With that one word, one of Hollywood's biggest rivalries started. No paperwork got signed right then, no agents wrangled about pay, and no long negotiations slowed the momentum. The deal sat on mutual respect and a steady conviction. Brynner went back to the stage almost right away, finishing the performance like nothing strange occurred. Still, everything had shifted. Soon he would swap royal garments from Siam for the crown of ancient Egypt, carrying a fierce assurance and a magnetic presence across the screen. His on-screen chemistry with Charlton Heston became one of the movie's strongest resources, giving viewers a convincing showdown between two formidable rulers, whose opposing principles drove the plot forward. Number 10. A production that conquered the desert. From the beginning, Cecil B. DeMille refused to recreate ancient Egypt entirely on a Hollywood backlot. He wanted audiences to feel the scale and authenticity of the biblical world, so he brought much of the production to Egypt and the Sinai Peninsula. It was an enormous undertaking, unlike almost anything attempted before. Thousands of cast members, technicians, costumes, props, and heavy equipment crossed continents to make the vision possible. Every day presented new logistical challenges, but DeMille believed the real landscape would give the film a sense of grandeur that no painted backdrop could ever duplicate. The famous Exodus sequence became the clearest example of that ambition. To portray the Israelites leaving Egypt, the production assembled approximately 25,000 extras and around 15,000 animals, including camels, horses, oxen, and livestock. Organizing such an enormous crowd required military-like precision. DeMille directed the movement from high above the desert, using a crane, a megaphone, and shortwave radios to communicate with assistant directors spread throughout the massive location. Every section of the crowd had carefully timed instructions, allowing thousands of people to move together in a believable wave across the desert. The result became one of the largest crowd scenes ever captured on film and remains breathtaking even by today's standards. The harsh desert itself became another obstacle. Fine Egyptian sand invaded every piece of equipment, especially the delicate VistaVision cameras that captured the spectacular widescreen images. Each evening, The cameras had to be completely dismantled and cleaned to prevent permanent damage. Even processing the footage became a challenge because no nearby laboratory could handle the specialized film. Number 9. The director who walked back from the edge. By the time the Ten Commandments moved into full production, Cecil B. DeMille was no young filmmaker chasing his first great success. He was 75 years old, already a giant of Hollywood history, and still pushing himself harder than many directors half his age. Most people in his position would have stepped back, trusted assistance, and protected their health. DeMille did the opposite. He remained fully present on set, watching details closely, correcting problems personally, and demanding that every frame match the enormous vision he carried in his mind. That stubborn commitment nearly cost him his life. During filming, a problem was reported with a camera placed high on one of the massive set structures. Instead of sending a crew member to inspect it, DeMille climbed the towering structure himself. The climb was dangerous, exhausting, and unnecessary for a man of his age, but he wanted to see the issue himself. At the top, the physical strain, stress, and heat overwhelmed him. DeMille suffered a serious heart attack, shocking the crew and throwing the production into fear. For a moment, the future of the entire film seemed uncertain. Doctors urged him to rest for weeks, maybe longer. DeMille refused to stay away. After only a short break, he returned to the set and resumed directing with the same force that had defined his career. It was reckless, but also revealing. The Ten Commandments was not just another movie to him. It was his final statement, his grand farewell, and he seemed determined to finish it no matter the personal cost. Number 8. The secretary who sketched the Angel of Death. One quiet evening during pre-production, one of Cecil B. DeMille's secretaries looked toward the sky and noticed an unusual cloud formation. Long, narrow tendrils stretched downward through the evening air, creating an eerie shape that felt less like ordinary weather and more like something alive. The sight lingered in her mind, so she quickly sketched what she had seen before the image disappeared. The drawing was simple, but it carried an unsettling mood that words could not explain. The next day, she showed the sketch to DeMille, who immediately recognized its dramatic potential. Rather than dismissing the rough drawing, he believed it perfectly captured the mysterious feeling he wanted for the Angel of Death. From that moment, the production team began transforming one person's spontaneous observation into one of the film's most unforgettable visual effects. Special effects supervisor John P. Fulton carefully photographed layers of white smoke against controlled backgrounds. Those separate elements were then combined through painstaking optical compositing, allowing the drifting shapes to move silently across the screen with ghost-like precision. The result did not resemble an ordinary cloud. Instead, it appeared to float with deliberate purpose, creeping through Egypt as though searching for every firstborn household. Audiences watched the dark presence glide between buildings without speaking, making the sequence frightening precisely because it moved so calmly. The effect relied on patience rather than spectacle, proving that subtle images can sometimes create the deepest fear. Looking back, it is remarkable that one of the film's most haunting moments began with an ordinary employee simply paying attention to the world around her. Inspiration arrived unexpectedly, and DeMille recognized its value immediately. Number 7. The Pharaoh's Hidden Advantage. On screen, Moses and Ramesses appear evenly matched, standing face to face as two powerful leaders locked in an unforgettable struggle. Yet behind the camera, there was one noticeable difference the filmmakers had to overcome. Charlton Heston stood around 6 feet 3 inches tall, while Yul Brynner measured closer to 5 feet 8 inches. A 7-inch height difference might not seem dramatic in everyday life, But in a film built around confrontations between two towering figures, it became a challenge that could not be ignored. If left uncorrected, the visual imbalance might have weakened the authority of the man playing Egypt's mighty pharaoh. Rather than allowing camera angles to expose the difference, the production relied on clever, practical solutions. Brenner frequently stood on carefully hidden platforms placed just outside the camera's view whenever he shared scenes with Heston. Set designers also built stairways, raised floors, and elevated sections into palace interiors so Ramesses naturally appeared at equal height during important conversations. These adjustments blended seamlessly into the lavish Egyptian architecture, making the illusion invisible to audiences. The camera, combined with thoughtful production design, quietly erased a physical difference that might otherwise have distracted from the emotional conflict unfolding between the two rivals. Brenner contributed just as much to the illusion himself. Knowing that much of his wardrobe revealed his arms and upper body, he committed to a disciplined weight training routine throughout production. His goal was not simply to appear fit, but to project the strength and confidence expected from a ruler commanding one of history's greatest civilizations. Height was not the only thing the camera had to adjust. Number 6. The Eyes of Egypt. Creating the world of ancient Egypt required more than elaborate temples, towering statues, and luxurious costumes. Cecil B. DeMille wanted every important character to appear as believable as possible, even down to the color of their eyes. During the 50s, makeup alone could not create the look he envisioned, so the production turned to an unusual solution. Several principal actors were asked to wear specially tinted brown contact lenses to give their eyes a darker appearance on camera. It was an ambitious attempt to enhance the film's visual authenticity, but the technology of the time made the process far more difficult than anyone expected. Unlike modern contact lenses, those used during production were thick, rigid, and often uncomfortable after only a short time under the blazing studio lights. Actors complained about dryness, irritation, and blurred vision throughout the long filming days. Keeping the lenses in place became another challenge, especially during emotional scenes that required intense movement or long hours on set. Anne Baxter, John Derek, Deborah Paget, and Nina Foch were among the performers who endured the discomfort in order to satisfy DeMille's vision. Their commitment reflected the extraordinary attention to detail that shaped every corner of the production, even when audiences would never realize the sacrifice hidden behind each close-up. One actress, however, eventually escaped the demanding requirement. Yvonne De Carlo, who portrayed Sephora, repeatedly struggled to keep the brown lenses in place. They shifted, slipped, and occasionally popped out during filming, forcing repeated interruptions and costly retakes. After enough frustration, DeMille finally abandoned the idea and allowed her to appear with her natural green eyes. Number 5. The villain role that went to the right actor for the wrong reasons. Every grand hero needs a villain strong enough to make the struggle feel dangerous. In the Ten Commandments, that role belonged to Baca, the cruel master builder who treats enslaved workers with cold arrogance. The part needed someone smooth, frightening, and believable. It could not be played like a loud cartoon villain. Baca had to feel like a man who enjoyed power because he had lived with it too long. One famous actor who wanted the role was Basil Rathbone. Audiences already knew him as one of cinema's great character actors, especially for his legendary connection to Sherlock Holmes. Rathbone understood that the Ten Commandments was not just another studio picture. It was a massive historical event in Hollywood, and he wanted to be part of it. He reportedly wrote to Cecil B. DeMille and made his interest clear, believing Baca was a rich villain role that could leave a lasting mark. For an actor of Rathbone's stature, that direct request showed how much the project meant. DeMille, however, chose Vincent Price. At first, that might have seemed surprising, especially with Rathbone available. But Price brought something sharper to Baca. He did not play him as merely brutal. He gave him polish, elegance, and a cruel sense of pleasure that made the character more unsettling. His voice, posture, and confidence created a villain who felt dangerous without needing to shout. Number 4. The moment that stopped the entire set. Cecil B. DeMille earned a reputation as one of Hollywood's strictest directors. He expected complete attention whenever he addressed the cast, and few people dared interrupt him. His sets were known for discipline, precision, and respect, especially on a production as enormous as The Ten Commandments. During the filming of the Golden Calf sequence, thousands of extras filled the set, creating one of the largest scenes in the entire movie. Coordinating such a massive crowd required absolute focus, and DeMille was carefully explaining exactly how he wanted the next portion of the scene performed. While speaking, he noticed 2 young women among the extras quietly whispering to one another. DeMille immediately stopped talking. The entire set fell silent as he fixed his attention on them. Everyone knew what usually happened when someone distracted the director during an important briefing. In a firm voice, he demanded to know what could possibly be so important that it deserved discussion while he was giving instructions. The atmosphere instantly became tense. Thousands of people waited without moving, expecting an uncomfortable confrontation that might end with the women being removed from the production. Instead, one of the women answered with surprising honesty. She admitted she had simply been asking her friend when the bald-headed old fellow was finally going to call lunch. For a brief moment, complete silence covered the enormous set. Then DeMille lifted his megaphone and, without anger or hesitation, announced one single word: lunch! The entire cast and crew erupted with laughter and relief. Even the extras, who had been holding their breath, could not stop smiling. Number 3. The ambulance on set. Not every unforgettable story from the Ten Commandments was about giant sets or groundbreaking special effects. Some of the film's most meaningful moments happened quietly, away from the cameras and crowds. One involved veteran actor H.B. Warner, a respected performer whose career stretched back to the silent film era. Decades earlier, Warner had portrayed Jesus in DeMille's The King of Kings, earning admiration for his calm and deeply moving performance. By the time The Ten Commandments entered production, however, Warner was well into his 80s, and his health had declined significantly. Most directors would have quietly accepted that his acting career had reached its end. DeMille saw things differently. Rather than replacing the aging performer with someone younger, he created the role of Aminadab, an elderly Hebrew who had become too weak to join the Exodus. The part perfectly matched Warner's physical condition while allowing him to appear in one final major production. It was more than thoughtful casting. It was a gesture of respect from one legendary filmmaker to another artist whose contributions had helped shape Hollywood's early years. DeMille understood Warner's importance and wanted him included in what would become his own final epic. Getting Warner to the studio was not easy. He was living in a nursing facility and could no longer travel independently. To make his participation possible, DeMille arranged for an ambulance to transport him to and from the set on filming days. There were no public announcements or grand displays of generosity. The arrangement remained a quiet act of kindness, allowing Warner to perform with dignity despite his fragile condition. His appearance in The Ten Commandments became the final role of a remarkable career, closing one chapter of film history while honoring another. Number 2. The plague that made everyone laugh. The plagues of Egypt remain some of the most unforgettable moments in the Ten Commandments. Rivers turned to blood, darkness covered the land, and the angel of death moved silently through the night. Every sequence was designed to inspire fear and demonstrate overwhelming divine power. Yet one plague never made it into the finished film, despite being carefully planned, filmed, and completed. It was the plague of frogs, and its disappearance came from a problem no one expected. Instead of terrifying audiences, the scene made everyone laugh. The production really tried to recreate that biblical moment using hundreds of genuine frogs, not some lazy substitute. They were set free across the palace sets, where they hopped through the corridors. Then, they surrounded the Egyptian court, just like it says in Scripture. In theory, the whole sequence would have turned into yet another heavy-handed demonstration of God's judgment, you know. But in real life, the frogs would not cooperate in any truly frightening manner. They bounced every which way, scattered in ways that were sort of unpredictable, and kept making motions that felt almost cheerful rather than brutal. No matter how intense or tensely the actors played their parts, the frogs acted like they were trying to snatch the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. Instead of building tension, they basically brought smiles and laughter even when everyone was supposed to be serious, watching the footage. When DeMille finally reviewed the finished sequence, he recognized the issue right away. The frogs just did not belong in the sober mood of the rest of the film. Rather than squeezing the scene into the final cut, he had to make the hard call to remove it completely. That costly set piece vanished, and there was no trace of it left in the completed movie. It went on to become one of Hollywood's more amusing behind-the-scenes anecdotes, showing how even seasoned filmmakers can lose a tug-of-war against nature. And after all those strange choices, one final detail gave the film its most powerful sound. Number 1. 2 voices for one God. When audiences heard the voice of God in the Ten Commandments, they assumed a single actor had delivered every line. The truth was far more inventive. Cecil B. DeMille believed that different moments of divine communication demanded different emotional qualities. The quiet conversation at the burning bush required intimacy, while the giving of the commandments atop Mount Sinai needed overwhelming authority. Instead of relying on one performer, he created 2 distinct vocal experiences that together formed one unforgettable presence. For the burning bush sequence, Charlton Heston's own voice became like the bass line. It was recorded in a careful way, and then electronically pulled down into a softer, deeper register. In the end, it sounded familiar, yet still mysterious, kinda like the voice came from inside Moses, not really from somewhere else. That small kind of treatment made the encounter feel more deeply personal, and it turned the exchange into something spiritual rather than staged. Audiences ended up hearing something calm and reassuring, quietly powerful too, in sync with the life-changing moment happening right there. The Mount Sinai scene needed a different kind of move entirely. DeMille chose Jesse Dellis Jukes, a trained bass vocalist, with a naturally resonant voice that had a lot of heft. But even that alone wasn't enough. The production mixed his recording with the sound of a large organ, adding this extra depth and richness under nearly every spoken line. When those layers came together, the effect was heavy, and it filled theaters with a remarkable force. People often said the voice felt timeless, commanding, and almost beyond human comprehension. It didn't really read like a normal narrator voice. It carried this presence that seemed bigger than the screen itself. By combining Heston's transformed performance with Jukes' thunder delivery, DeMille managed something that felt unique. Each voice fit its scene, but still served the same divine character. The method boosted the film's emotional impact, and it showed the director's non-stop attention to detail. Even today, those moments people remember keep going, lasting like they never truly fade out. And there you have it, 15 insane details you missed in the 10 Commandments. Which one surprised you the most? Comment below, like this video, subscribe, and watch the next video on screen for more hidden stories behind classic movies.